Thank you for showing up this morning. The Citizens Club Monthly Policy Breakfast, and a very special program this morning that I just entitled the Sangamon County Project. I'm not going to spend any time on that because we have two exceptional guests with us. But J. Craig Coyle is the principal and COO of the Development Consortium, Inc., and Janet Mathis is the principal and CEO of the Development Consortium, Inc. You may be aware, I think most of you are, that they recently completed a study countywide, at least on the broad topic of economic development. And with that in mind, I'm going to call both of them up here, and I think we'll start with Greg. And thank you for joining us. It's all yours.
Great, thank you. Good. Can't see anything up here. Wow, good morning, everybody. How are you? So this is going to be a challenge for me, I'll have to tell you, because I like to wander when I talk, and they said you have to talk behind a podium, and I'm really not good at that. So bear with me. We'll get through this. Many of you are aware of the project that we started over the last couple of years, and some of what we're going to show you, some of you have seen before. Some is going to be new to some of you. But what we're going to do is kind of go through the study very quickly and then open it up for questions, because I think the best opportunity for a productive session is to have some dialogue and back and forth and try to have some conversation about what we found out. So with that, we'll get started. This is a little bit of background on TDC. We were founded in 2006, as Bob alluded to. Janet and I both formed the company. We specialize in site selection for companies, real estate, Illinois enterprise zones, and consulting to local governments and businesses across the country. I hate the number of 60 years, but we've been in the business between us about 60 years at all levels, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Economic development is kind of our lifeblood and our passion. And both of us came about it accidentally, I think, on a varied career path, but it's been something that's been very productive and something that we've enjoyed a lot and allowed us to do a lot of things that have made a difference in a lot of communities across the country and across the state of Illinois.
So I think it's important, we're going to go back and forth, so we're a little different in speaking. I think it's important to acknowledge or talk about why Sangamon County wanted to hire the two of us. There's a lot of people that do this kind of work. There's a lot of people that are involved in economic development, so why Craig and Janet in the Development Consortium. So I've actually known Craig since I worked in the governor's press office under Edgar, which seems like 4,000 lifetimes ago sometimes, but a lot of good friends that I knew back then in the room today. He was the guy on the phone that I would call and say, what in the heck does CDAP mean, or what are these other programs, because I have no idea. I'm a press person. I have to know a little bit about everything and not much about anything in particular. So our relationship started back then. Craig actually has had a lot of experience statewide. He was the guy that did the major projects for the state of Illinois for Department of Commerce and Community Affairs back in the day, or DECA. So with the big projects that came in, the Boeings and some of those major construction projects, some in the billions of dollars, Craig was the guy that handled those for the state. He decided to leave the state of Illinois in 2002 and go to work for Decatur and Macon County, so presented himself with a challenge. And actually they had, and he'll probably tell you, more than I think $2 billion of investment during his tenure there, and thousands of jobs created. Now, people will say Decatur, Macon County, that there's not a lot going on, but there really has been, and there's been growth, and things go up and down, through the years. So there's been different attritions that have happened. He also ran the foreign trade zone there, and he ran the enterprise zone program. So he's got a lot of experience in that way as well. And he's from Petersburg, so has an affinity for Springfield, knows this area. If you ever go out to Petersburg, Porta, the Coyle Field is named for his dad. So you know he's got a lifeblood here, knows a little bit about the area, but not completely tied and ingrained in Sangamon County. So that's a little bit about Craig's background.
So to bring that around to talk a little bit about Janet, as she alluded to, we met when we were at the Department of Commerce. She was the governor's office, I was the Department of Commerce. She's had an interesting career path because she was in press, for the governor's office. She worked and ran the press office for the Illinois State Fair. She came back to the Department of Commerce, where she was Northwest Regional Rep in the Quad Cities, and had a great opportunity to work with a lot of major projects on site selection activities. So you look at names like John Deere and Raflatech and Walmart. If you go to the northern Illinois area, northwestern Illinois area, and you see distribution centers, the Walmart distribution centers, Janet had a hand in those. And her name is on a number of projects throughout the northern part of the state. And since she joined TDC, obviously a number of site selection projects throughout the Midwest as well. She left the state of Illinois, and that's when we formed the Development Consortium. And then she went on, interestingly, a contract through TDC to Renew Moline, which is a downtown redevelopment organization in Moline, Illinois, and oversaw roughly $1 billion in investment over her time period there. So it's downtown renovation and rehabilitation is their primary focus, and has had a pretty significant track record of positive activity there as well. And then as time has gone by, she served on the transition team for the current governor when he was brought into office, and serves on the board of Farm Illinois, which is an agricultural concern focused on ag business opportunities and related activities across the state of Illinois. So when we talk a little bit about, again, why TDC for this study, we hate to say it, but we've kind of seen it all, right? We've seen businesses located throughout the state. We've dealt with international and national site selection consultants. We've done it ourselves. We've cited facilities in Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky. We've cited facilities in Texas. We've visited most states throughout the country. And we've seen what other people do and how they do it. And we know what works and kind of what doesn't. So it provided us a little bit of an interesting opportunity, I think, to take a look at this particular area. So this was our role, and I'm not going to read this to you, but they wanted us to evaluate current and past practices for economic development. And we did that basically to see what was working and what wasn't. And we can say what we think, obviously, when we write a report, but it's more important what you think.
So to that point, we interviewed almost 130 individuals from about 95 organizations. And we thought it was important to do face-to-face. So we actually came here and went and visited people in their places of work, their locations, anywhere from businesses to the labor groups, to schools, to government officials, local and state government, utilities and transportation entities, and we even talked to some of our peers from across the country and some that do international more than we do, and some other site selection from all over the country and the world.
So here's some examples of the questions that we ask, and again, you can read those, but it was the positives and negatives of doing business in the area. Would you encourage business in your line of work to locate here? Who advocates or is in charge of economic development in the Sangamon County region? Are those efforts successful? And this was my favorite question because it spurred a lot of conversation. We call it the 45-year question, which is essentially what happened or what did not happen in the last 45 years that kept Springfield, Sangamon County region from becoming a vibrant, diverse state capital like so many others have across the country. So the responses were direct, and here's an example of some of the first ones.
And we kept them confidential because we wanted to have a good open dialogue. So the positives were we're close to St. Louis. This area is close to St. Louis and Chicago. It's a great place to raise a family. It's safe. There's generally a good school system, close-knit family. But to be honest, that's responses you can hear in almost anywhere USA. So, we were hoping for a little more about what was unique to Sangamon County when we asked that question.
And that was really telling because a lot of places that we go and we ask the question, we're doing a site location visit, for example, tell us about the strengths of your community, and they'll point to, we have a strong tech sector, we have a strong manufacturing sector, we have a strong distribution sector. We got none of that when we were asking the question. So of course you ask the positives, and then of course you have to ask the negatives.
Yeah, and I think one that's really concerning to a lot of you in this room and to us too, as I've got a kid in college and Craig's is now 30, but our kids aren't coming back here. And why are they not coming back to this area? There's no plan for this area. There's no unified efforts. People talk negatively about the area. There's nobody really in charge, so we don't know what's going on.
You know, and the interesting part about this was all of our questions were pretty direct questions, right? And this was information that people just started talking about, which tells you very quickly that it's top of mind for most people. There's not a venue for them to get the thought out, it seems like. And we struggled with some of these. The top one in particular was one, it's not a stimulating community and it's not a venue for acceptance of new ideas. So you push into that and say, what do you mean by that, right? And a lot of times it was, look, if you're not part of the same old crowd, you don't get any traction on your ideas. If you're a younger person, if you're a person of color, you don't get traction on new ideas. People don't give you the stature that you need to move things forward. And that was a concern to us. The other thing that really kind of stood out, which we struggled with, again, is, as Janet said, the kid thing. Kids are our future, right? So I just show of hands. How many people have kids or grandkids or know people with kids or grandkids who have left Springfield, Sangamon County and aren't coming back?
Most of the room.
This question is a little misframed in the title, but it was basically, if there's another business in your line of work, what would you tell them about coming to Sangamon County?
And again, some concerns. You know, there's not enough business to go around currently. If you're not connected politically to the right people, you're not going to get anything done. You have to have your project ready to go and staged, or again, it's not going to happen very quickly. So it wasn't really encouraging. If we were citing a company to come here, to come and tell them, listen, there's all these hurdles that are barriers to entry. So again, some concerns.
This was kind of the crux of the matter for us. Who is the advocate for economic development? There's perceptions about who's in charge and who should be in charge, but there was no consistent answer. And the concerning part was 55% of the responses said no one. I've never been in a community, honestly, where that was the case. 9 times out of 10, you'll call somebody and say, so I have this project, who do I call? And they'll go, call that person. Not the response we got here. This was scary to a large degree because I don't want anybody to take offense by this, by what I'm saying, but down at the bottom it says business leaders like Corky Joyner and John Fulgenzi. Great people, but is that the central point of contact for economic development in Sangamon County? Probably not.
Well, and to add to that, Craig, for a second, I had somebody tell me that their own personal accountant would be the person they would direct people to. Again, probably not the right person, right?
So it's very telling, and that's not to say that there aren't good things happening, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But if you're marketing your community, you have a vision for your community, which we'll talk about in a little bit, everybody knows who's in charge. And again, are economic development efforts successful?
Again, certain things are happening. Sometimes in spite of themselves, it doesn't seem like the entities are talking, they're doing things in silos. We're stuck in the past. A lot of people don't know if there's things going on. So there are some great things happening. We will say that in Springfield and Sangamon County and as a whole. There are some great things that are going on, but people don't often know about them, or they're very much not a collaborative effort. So DSI might be doing something that Innovate doesn't know about, or that the Chamber doesn't know about, or Lincoln Land might be doing something in workforce development that people don't know about, or the Black Chamber might be doing something that's happening that the rest of the community doesn't know how to interact with or doesn't realize is going on, so they create a secondary program that's exactly the same. So there really needs to be more collaboration.
You know, and when we put this presentation together, the county board members have seen this because this was one we presented back when we did the report, parts of this anyway. We picked out key statements, but this was kind of the pattern that we saw, right? The two that stand out to me in this one are the one in the middle. Transformational action is needed, or this town will not compete in the future for people and jobs. Pretty critical stuff, right? And the bottom one, direct quote, that's a stupid question. And then they proceeded to say to me, what other capital city do you know that has this much vacant space? I couldn't answer that question because I don't know of any, honestly. And Janet and I alluded to this before, and I didn't say this about Janet, I should have. When she was here working for the governor's office, she lived here. Her son was born here. So we've both got the ties as well, in direct and indirect ways. And when we're doing this study, we're just like, this is really tough. I'm hating what I'm hearing here. It's not what I quite expected, and we struggled with it as we went through the process. So here's the 45-year question.
I'll let you.
And again, that's what happened or didn't happen that kept this region from growing and being a dynamic, diverse community. We heard a lot of comments, well, yeah, it's Chicago, they drain everything. Okay, there's other states that have big cities and they seem to manage it where their state capital is not the biggest city. But I think the highlighted one in the middle is the key one. And again, you can read those for yourself. The one about we've always had the state. We didn't, there's no plan because we had the state. That was our plan. That's a lot of complacency, right? But the highlighted one, there's a complete lack of community vision. But even if we had one, who could lead it? No offense, and we heard this a lot, we've had lots of plans and studies, but no action. And we went back and we looked at plans and studies, and we're reading through this stuff, and we're like, they said this 15 years ago. Why haven't they moved forward on things?
And when we actually started this study, before we got out to interview people, we were in a room somewhat like this with community leaders, and someone asked the question, well, so what happens after you come up with the plan? What's going to go on? And I was kind of perplexed because, I've been involved with a lot of planning before, and we implement plans usually, right? And that has not happened here, so.
So we're going to talk just in a general sense about this. This is external perceptions, and this relates back to the conversations that we had with statewide utilities who have interaction with Sangamon County and occasionally Springfield, railroad industrial development folks who deal with national prospects and business clients, and the national and international site location people that we've dealt with on and off for the last 30 years. The site location folks, when we called them up, I'd say, okay, here's the question. We're doing this project. You guys have been all over the place. Tell me what you think about Sangamon County. Every single one of them, where's that? And you can chuckle at that, but these people are based in Chicago and St. Louis, okay? And Indianapolis, one of them that we dealt with. It's Springfield. Oh. And then the answers go, first thing I think of, place of dysfunction. So what's that tell you? You're being branded by the chaos down the street. And there's been no effort to counteract that. So every media report that you see, dysfunction in Springfield, dysfunction in Springfield, dysfunction in Springfield. Doesn't mean there is. It means that's a perception that there is. And a couple of other people said to us pretty directly, I don't know what their value proposition is. It's like the example one of them gave to me was Jonesboro, Arkansas. Said to us, you know what they do down there? They do food processing. Everybody knows that. If there's a food processing project, we know we need to call them and see if this is a fit for them. If I think I have this project, Sangamon County is not on my radar because I don't know what they stand for.
Other than Lincoln and tourism.
Right.
And government.
The industrial folks for the railroads were kind of along the same line. They're like, there's some decent sites there, but the infrastructure really isn't there for the kind of projects that we're dealing with, so there's other places that will go that are already prepared. And, you're not alone in that box. There are a lot of communities that have railroads, but don't have sites that are fully developed and ready to go either. So that's kind of a long-term piece of this puzzle. Technology, awesome. Is there somebody back there? Dysfunction.
Dysfunction in
Yeah, right.
technology.
There's somebody back there or not? No. Okay.
So to go on.
Yeah, we'll just leave that up there.
So basically, the conclusions were there's a lack of a unified regional vision. There's a lack of authority by a singular entity focused on economic development to carry out that vision and work with all the entities that need to be brought into play. There's a lack of leadership that's truly pushing for economic development to be focused, collaborative, regional initiative. And by leadership, we're talking about community leaders here that are, we have a lot of community leaders here, so we don't want to say there aren't in Sangamon County. But the question is, are they willing to go ahead and push the rock uphill for the time it's going to take to get this done, to get something truly started that's going to be to go ahead and change the way things are perceived here and what's been going on. You know, the declining populations, declining household incomes, people that are leaving the area. Are people willing to do what it takes to get that to change? Unification of the entire region is lacking. It needs to be developed. This isn't just Springfield either. I mean, we're talking about outlying areas that are important to the economy. There's a lot of things that are offered. There's workforce that's coming in every day. There are companies that actually are in Auburn and other places that are important to the economy here locally. And embracing new ideas and new opportunities, critical to success. And that means new people being involved and new vision as well, and being able to talk about that and try and embrace what others bring, because sometimes people have really great ideas that haven't been at the table before.
So if I ask anybody in this room, tell me what do you want what's Sangamon County stand for? Take out government and Lincoln? What's your vision of Sangamon County? Anybody?
I understand at least Springfield is a city for insurance and
Insurance and medicine.
Medicine.
Okay. Anything else?
University.
Okay.
I have a vision.
Okay.
The Central Illinois high-tech triangle. I've been talking to a lot of people who think it's a good idea to use the regional approach. Instead of Springfield's the greatest city, Peoria's the greatest city, Champaign's the greatest city. Put it all together because there's a lot of high-tech innovation.
Right.
And by putting it all together and have a means that people can find out what everybody else is doing. It's very difficult as a business to find out what's going on in Decatur, who are the players,
Right.
who might be
That's
interested
true.
in using our services. It's hard finding out. Nobody knows anything in the other communities, even locally. I don't know who's who might be interested in the services I have. Nobody knows anything. You have to put it all together.
It's
Make no little plans.
That's a great point, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Once we figure out what we're going to be here, right?
Yeah.
Then we can move forward with those types of things. I think there's great synergy there.
And I want to digress, there's a $1.2 billion with the B Research Institute being developed by the University of Illinois in the South Loop of Chicago.
Mhm.
And there's supposed to be 2 nodes in downstate Illinois, one in Springfield and one in Champaign. Now, is that going to be an opportunity? The part of this $1.2 billion, is the Springfield node going to be anything? I don't know.
Yeah, good question, right? So that's the thing. There's opportunity here. So, yep,
Agriculture. Yeah.
there you go. So this is where you are now, to get back to the presentation briefly here. A lot of good organizations and a lot of people in their little silos, right?
And these aren't all of them. This
That's
is
not
just a
all of them.
representation.
And it's a little unique because we see silos everywhere we go, but we don't see the number of silos that we've seen here. This is where you need to be graphically.
Really, everything working together is what this is supposed to represent. So when you're looking at job retention and creation and workforce development and placemaking, which is what DSI does, diversity, entrepreneurship, and rural economic development, it needs to be cross-working together as you're developing research and your communication and marketing for the area and your public policy for the region and your infrastructure needs and your access to capital. All this needs to work together holistically.
And it's a challenge to do that no matter where you're at, but it happens and it can be done. but everybody has to be on the same page, and that's the challenge, right? You have to get people who think about the community first and the silo second. And people are naturally gravitating to protecting the silo because that's what you do. But your silo is worthless without participation from everybody else. And it's worthless without cooperation and integration of other ideas and progressive thinking to some degree that moves you above everybody else. Just keep in mind, when people make location decisions, they want to be someplace that's current, has a strong workforce, they know what they want to be when they grow up, and they have the pieces in place to make those things happen.
Yeah, even if it's not there today, there's a way to get to where they need to be.
So back, as Janet said, holistic economic development ecosystem. This is about as simple as you can put it, as hokey as it may be, right? Are you going to be what you've been, or are you going to change and move things forward? So this is kind of a wrap, and then we'll have questions. In the report, basically what we had said is Sangamon County needs to do these things if you're going to be successful, and we've alluded to all these. You need to know what you are and what you want to be, and you have to embrace the vision. You have to quit performing below capacity, which I think almost everybody we spoke to believes the region is performing below capacity. Don't live in the past. State government's not going to be what state government was 20 years ago. Recognize that the medical community is always changing. It's strong, but it's always changing. Where's it going to be in 10, 15 years, and are you going to adapt to that as a community? Bridge your silos. This is really important. Engage all parts of the county in the economic development strategy. Recognize that economic diversity is integral to health. Embrace retention efforts. This was a thing that struck us as well. We said, so anybody reaching out to you guys to talk to you about your problems, your concerns, your issues, what your challenges are?
This was businesses locally.
Businesses? And what was the answer?
No, not typically. Unless somebody was coming to ask for money for something.
Ironically, there was a business retention program that was started after we started the survey. I suppose that was coincidental, but that was the response we were getting, right?
And the reality is most of your business growth is going to come from current businesses in the area. It's not going to come from a new company coming in with 3,000 jobs or 300 jobs even. It's going to be local growth. I mean, look at what LRS is doing right now. You know, you can see the new building going up. Kind of neat, isn't it? But that's where the growth is going to come from. So it's really important to be reaching out to them all the time.
And the bottom one on this page is fostering entrepreneurial activity. You guys have a really good start there with I Spy. We've talked about this in our interviews. We've talked about it subsequently on the media and other places. But as a region, you need to understand and work to address your employer's workforce needs. That's critical. Where's the pipeline for all the occupations that are out there and that are going to be available, the ones that are there now, the ones that you need to have in the future? You need to have a marketing strategy for the community in the region. What do you stand for? What's your vision? Who are you? Why should people come here? Why do they want to be here? It's all basic things. And I think this is really critical. Be inclusive of diverse thoughts and backgrounds in developing the vision and carrying out its implementation. And I'll be honest, we struggled with this. We made some recommendations going forward. You have a lot of leadership that's kind of what it's always been in the community. And that needs to stay in place in order to start the ball rolling. But as this evolves moving forward, you really need to take into account the thoughts of people who have really good ideas that may not be in the normal loop. And the last thing I think is, can you transition to a global innovation economy? And people have said to us in these interviews, this is Springfield. Can we be a global innovation economy? If you want to be. You already are in some sectors. Janet mentioned LRS. They're all over the world. Brandt, they're all over the world. You have other companies in this community who do work across the globe. But where's the synergy? Where's the packaging? Where's the messaging to people to locate here in the future about how you get to that next step?
And do people here locally even know that these companies are doing these great things all over the world?
And we said that before, it's been studied to death, so it's time for action. We proposed a new public-private partnership focused strictly on economic development. And that's a little different, well, it's a lot different than the chamber and other entities like downtown Springfield. It's totally focused on job attraction, retention, and expansion initiatives. Does the marketing, helps create the vision with input from everybody. Business leadership drives this.
And we're talking about primary job creation. And for those of you, I didn't know what it was until I got more involved with economic development. When I was back in the press staff, had no idea what that meant. But there are people that live, or jobs that are living wage jobs that support other industries in the community. So by the fact that they have employment, they're able to go out and buy groceries at a grocery store and go to restaurants and buy things at Walmart and go to the gas station. But the primary job creators are what the CDC needs to be involved with.
So there's been some people who've said to us, just kind of anecdotally, they said, well, local government needs to be in charge of that. Or why do we need an EDC? EDCs have specific roles, and they're the coordinator of things, for lack of a better way to put it, right? They're the project facilitator, the project manager, when you do get a prospect and a project in town who's looking at you. Local,
They're the entry into the community. They're the
Yeah.
welcome mat.
kind of a one-stop shop, if you will. Local government is one of the players. Local government controls the zoning. Local government controls the incentives, right? Local government is your partner. The EDC is the one who coordinates the messaging, gets the prospects in here, and does the sell job, and coordinates with all the local players to make sure that they're providing what they need to tell the story, to convince them to locate in Sangamon County. So this is the last thing, and I'll just leave you with that. And then we'll open it up for questions. Are you ready to be part of the change, or are you just kind of going to say, yeah, it is what it is? And only you guys can answer that. We can't answer that.
So, thank you.
We'll open up for questions. John has a mic over here. I'm going to carry this one,
The other mic?
and but we'd like to get your questions through the mic. It just makes everything a lot better. And may I suggest, as usual, that questions be succinct and brief, and the answers reasonably succinct and brief.
To what degree does the current economic environment of the state impact these proposals?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So, as the state is working on getting its fiscal house in order and other initiatives in order, this is the time to be getting prepared locally. It truly is. It's going to change. Actually, back in the early 2000s, the state of Illinois was the #1 place to come in the entire country. The economic development team was known to be the best, and we had a lot of growth happening. That will evolve and change. Again, things are cyclical with the state, with companies, with local entities. So we really feel that this is the time to get things in order here locally in Sangamon County, so you're ready to go ahead and take advantage of the changes that will occur. And I will say another thing. I think we in Illinois are our own worst enemies. We're beating ourselves down. We shouldn't be. This state, bar what's going on with some of the things in state government, is a tremendous place to be. It's the only place where all the Class 1 railroads meet. It has tremendous transportation infrastructure otherwise. We talked about what's going on with U of I as far as this new initiative, but we have some world-class institutions. We have 3 major federal laboratories in this state, including the only National Ag Lab in Peoria. And we've got a lot of Fortune 100 and 500 companies. So we have a lot to be proud of, and we have a workforce that people envy across the country. We have a lot to do that people envy, and we should be proud of that.
Can't add anything to that.
Yes, good morning. My name is Silas Johnson, the president of Faith Coalition of Common Good and pastor of Calvary Baptist Church. I noticed in your presentation you said that the EDC should be concerned with the entire community.
Yes.
If you notice, Springfield, the east side of town runs right off of I-55 and everything east of 11th Street. It's basically can be economically developed, but they have went north and west and have ignored totally the east side of Springfield. I've been here 40 years, and I have yet to have more than 5 new businesses. Pepsi-Cola moved, and a couple of state buildings, but to say there is an economic building on the east side of town, I have somebody could tell me different. But what I see is not there. So you said the whole city, not just part of the city.
The whole county, right?
The entire county, yes.
Yes. Well, it's true, and part of that is, excuse me, part of that is that those of you who've been around for a while know this, right? We all remember when the car dealerships were on the east side of town and they all moved to the west side of town because, for whatever reason. Retail commercial businesses tend to cluster and they follow each other. They're like the herd mentality. So once one starts, they all start. And that's just kind of the way it works, unfortunately. And the east side took the brunt of the hit on that over the past number of years. But I think at the core of the issue, honestly, is that it goes to demand for services. And I'm talking about community-wide demand, right? People get in their patterns and they get stuck there and they don't get out of them. So part of the issue, I think, with the EDC would be as creating the vision for this region, would be to say, here are our other opportunities where we can show growth and potential in the community and figure out ways to make those things work. I mean, in our interviews, we talked to a lot of people on the east side who said, look, there's opportunity here. We just have to figure out how to target it, make it work, and show people that it's there, right? And that's a long-term process, but I think it's one that can happen, and you can't ignore it. You just have to take firm steps on an everyday basis to start changing that tide. I don't know if I answered your question, but I mean, it's...
You made a comment in your report more than once about inclusivity. You made a comment in the report about racism. And let's face facts, there's racism in this community, folks. The suggested board, the initial board, is a bunch of white guys, except for 2 women, I believe, but a bunch of rich guys in this community. I see no representation, none, from the minority community other than the Black Chamber of Commerce. It is my suggestion that this report be amended to include at least 2 organizations that represent minorities in our community, people who go to work every day, and at no cost. These organizations don't have $25,000 to pony up. Because they don't have $25,000, they're not going to be at the table, they're going to be on the menu. And that needs to change, and it needs to change before this report goes forward, before this thing is finalized. To say it can be done tomorrow is wrong. It needs to be done now. I was in the legislature, sitting in the gallery, when they passed a bill to require that on every economic development commission in Illinois, that there be minority representation at no cost, because these organizations don't have the money. That bill passed because there was no good reason not to do that. I encourage a change.
Now we recognize that, and one of the concerns that we had, honestly, when we were writing this report, and we came up with the model for it, was exactly what you said. I don't disagree with you. But the bottom line is, as you're trying to form the organization, you've got to have the capital in place. And so the capital is what's driving the formation, like it or not, and others can talk about how that ultimately works out. But what we've recommended is groups added to that once the organization is formed to make sure you get input from everybody, because you have to. We don't disagree with that. We raised it as a red flag early on, and I think that there will be steps taken to deal with that. I really do. And without it, there won't be success. I agree with you.
Over here. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shelley Heidemann with Faith Coalition for the Common Good as well as Pastor Johnson. And I thought you just I've read the report, and you neglected to tell people about what you figured out as the solution. And Jim kind of referred to that in creating this commission of people that put in $25,000 to $50,000 per year. And again, the list is white, wealthy men. And my question is, how is anything going to change if you continue the status quo? Because to me, it looks like you've laid out all of these problems, but then the solution is the same thing. And that doesn't make sense.
Do you want to go this time, or you want me to do it?
Sure. Okay. So again, as Craig said, we recognize the issue. And we gave just a brief recommendation in this. We have working groups that we proposed too, if you recall in reading it, right? One of them was focused very much on diversity, and we're talking diversity not just of race, but also of age. Where are the young people in this group, right? Women, there's not a lot of women involved in leadership locally in Springfield. And again, as Craig said, there needs to be a way to build capital to start this up, but there's no reason there can't be inclusivity. Now, what happens locally as far as implementation, we don't control that. You know that. We're just consultants that came in and said you need to restructure and you need to be inclusive. You need to figure out how to be inclusive. And so we can't dictate how that occurs.
Good morning. I serve on the city council and represent an area of town on the near southwest side, neighborhoods 50 to 100 years old, middle income, stable neighborhoods. I'm an outsider to Springfield, and just a personal perspective, I've found that at the neighborhood level, Springfield very welcoming. I represent an area that 50 years ago would have been 5% minority. It's now 15% minority. My question is this: despite the fact that our capital city has the most miserable partner that one could ever imagine, I'm talking about state government in the state, how do you account for the fact that despite that, we consistently, for the last 10 years, have had either the second or third lowest unemployment rate in the state?
Well, that's a good question, but it's back to figures, right? Overall employment has dropped over the last number of years. So there hasn't been growth in employment. There's people who are working, unemployment rate's down. But if you look at total employment, the pattern is down.
The other point of the unemployment rate that people may not realize, it doesn't figure people that are out of the workforce and not looking for work. So they're not part of that number. So there may be a lot of folks that are unemployed but not being counted towards that because they're not currently seeking employment. So again, like Craig said, with numbers, there's many ways to look at them.
And you guys all saw probably the USA Today rankings. Springfield Sangamon County was number 6 in the country in terms of job losses. I don't know if I agree with that totally, but it's the perception again, right? And this organization and looking at things differently can help turn that tide.
Good morning. Wow, that was loud.
Where's he at?
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, there he is.
I've been around Springfield, although I hope I don't look like it. I've been around Springfield for quite a while, and I think we forget that at one time we had an economic development council that was a partnership between the Chamber of Commerce, Sangamon County, and the city of Springfield. Each of the 3 entities all had representation on the board. They had a retention program, and eventually, of course, that evolved into the Q5 program. And here we are again, starting over, hitting the reset button. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but how do we make sure that we don't flounder as an economic development corporation, council, and that it's successful and we stay on track? I guess really what I want to know is, how do we stay on track? How does this new group stay on track?
Do you want to do that in a minute? Okay. I think the key is that you have to hold the organization accountable and recognize while you're holding them accountable that the change is not going to happen tomorrow, right? The reason we recommended what we did is because it's, as you said, time to kind of set the reset button and totally focus on job development. think about economic development this way. It's the only thing that is impacted by every single thing in the community. So schools, poverty, infrastructure, local government policies, regulation, workforce, all those, it goes across the gamut, right? All those pieces have to work in order for the EDC to be successful and to have its message and to start going down the right path. But at the end of the day, they have to be held accountable for success. And to say that, yeah, we've done this before, I've heard that before in a number of communities, right? No, it's the same, we're doing this again, here we go again. But it's about the leadership, and it's about the vision, and it's about a commitment of the community, not silos, but the community, to move it forward. And if it's not moving forward, the community needs to step up and say, this is not working, you need to do this way.
Yeah, something to that. And just to add to that, when we're talking about visioning, it's more than, boy, I want to be the best tech place in the world. How do you get there? What are all the pieces? And that's part of this working group concept we threw out there was, let's say St. John's and Memorial needs X-ray techs, and I know they do. And St. John's and Memorial can't hire the X-ray techs that are coming out of Lincoln Land because they're not being trained appropriately, because Lincoln Land hasn't talked to the employers. Shouldn't we be, part of the vision is how do we get those people to be trained appropriately so we're getting them practicums in the places they're probably, we hope they're going to work so they stay in the community, and we start building momentum that way. And that's what we envision for, and what strong economic development entities do, is that they pull all those pieces together so it's not just, boy, we've got this pie in the sky, but how are we getting to there with steps that are constantly being evaluated and re-looked at and maybe changed along the way. And so that's part of this accountability piece that Craig is talking about.
EDCs have been around for a while, and there's some pretty close to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just outside of Sangamon County.
Right.
And I guess a couple related questions is, how does the EDC have a unique ability to bring the community together as you're seeing as a problem? And then two, do you have any case evidence around other communities that have been effective in this? And then the last one, is there something beyond this also in the recommendations? Or is the EDC the primary recommendation?
Beyond it in terms of next steps,
economic
you mean?
Development, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah. I will be able to talk soon, sorry. There are a number of EDCs around the state that have worked and worked effectively. And so you notice when we talked earlier, it's about leadership, authority, and vision, right? The EDCs in successful communities have been granted the leadership role by the community, and that includes local government and all the pieces and parts associated with the community. And their task is to lead the charge for the community in terms of primary job development. The ones who do it well are, they've been around for a long time and they've been successful doing it and they have a track record of accomplishment. Honestly, there's ones that don't do it well. And usually they have to take a step back or they go away or they reinvent themselves. You can look at capital cities around the region and see their economic development corporations and how they're set up. They're public-private partnerships, and they're all very similar. And the key here is that government doesn't drive the job development, the private sector drives the job development. Private sector creates jobs, they know what they need, they know what the challenges are, they know what has to happen to keep them ahead of the curve so that they're competitive in the future. And those kinds of things create the base to allow you to grow your other business sectors. In terms of what happens after this, that wasn't part of the scope of what we do but in the study, but theoretically what happens is you start creating wins, and back to my point about Jonesboro, wins beget wins, right? People start looking at you as a location for a new facility or a new any kind of office or any kind of primary job generation activity. And so it's kind of self-fulfilling at some point in time.
Good morning. The Alderman raised the issue about Q5, and many of us that's in this room, we sat in those meetings, those planning meetings for Q5, and it had some lofty goals that was included in that document. Specifically, I'm going to address the issues of minority participation. My question is, what's going to happen to Q5? My second part of the question is, will you study the goals that were set in Q5 for minority participation and explain to us how you're going?
Or specifically about Q5, obviously we're in a transition period here now. And to build on what Craig said, I'm very uncomfortable talking about this because this is really not about the county and it shouldn't be about local government at all. It should be about the private sector. So that effort is underway, moving towards that, the private sector leadership. To give people an update on the EDC, it's been incorporated. There's temporary officers in place, but they are in a transition, trying to get out of the gate. And part of that is transitioning from Q5 and the chamber role over to the EDC. I think the plan is that eventually Q5 transitions away and the EDC steps in. And that leadership of the EDC and the chamber are working on that. I know the chamber has endorsed the new EDC concept. They're very much in favor of it. I've been working with them directly, as has, and that's not happening anymore because this is now with this EDC, the private sector side, to make that transition happen. And that's going to involve talking to the Q5 investors here during this year, asking them to support the EDC. Some may not. But I know that effort's going to be made to have them transition, not only just to support it, but to financially support it as well.
Yeah, and in terms of additional study activities or whatever, that's out of the scope of what our original process was. So.
Hi, I moved to the area. I'm a Latina. I moved to the area 3 years ago, and what startles me is the crime rate in Springfield has skyrocketed. My question is, does crime affect that companies not wanting to come into the area?
Okay. Yeah, it's a definite factor. When we look at community profile information, it's a definite factor. People want to know that their employees are safe, that their business is safe and secure, and you know, they're going to look in areas that are less crime-ridden than not, obviously. And communities as a whole that have lower crime rates are going to be typically more successful in attracting those kinds of jobs.
And it just doesn't seem like it's being addressed. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
This goes back to what Craig said earlier about literally everything in a community is impacted, or economic development is impacted by literally every component of a community. So that is something that would be a concern to look at.
I think one of the things that has been talked about but not actually said, and that is trust. I don't think we trust each other enough in this town, because it's kind of like everybody has a professional team they want to support, and that's those silos. And if those specific ones are not of my best interest, then I'm not going to support anybody else or support it. I don't think I see enough cooperation, enough inclusion, and I think with having some kind of way get across that we're open and we're honest with each other and we include more people, I think the trust factor will go down and we'll see more support and cooperation with each other. I think that's what's missing, the big trust word.
Yeah, you're right. Actions actions speak louder than words, and we heard that a lot from people, what you just said. So I think people recognize the issue. The question is, how are you going to deal with it?
If I may ask the two of you to take a couple of minutes to wrap up whatever it is you want to say on your way out, I would appreciate it.
Should
lives
we
closer.
run? I don't know.
No, this has been a great conversation, and what you're asking about are things that we were concerned about too, and you see it in the study, and you see it in recommendations that we need to have inclusivity, we need to have a vision for this area that everyone has had a part in shaping and being a part of to keep on track and accountable. We need to have authority for an entity to be able to bring all those groups together to create that trust relationship, so we're starting to have some collaborative efforts that are ongoing and not just once in a while or in a very specific silo. Leadership needs to be there to bring that all together, and we need to really have a better understanding and empathy for everybody as we go forward to create a better economy for the area.
And I really can't add a lot onto that other than I'm going to put on my local resident hat. Does Petersburg count as a local resident? I think it does, sort of, right? Because I spend all my money here, it seems like, in this county. Personally, I'm going to be really disappointed if at the end of the day, after we spent literally thousands of hours interviewing and drafting and conversing and getting feedback and arguing amongst ourselves sometimes about how we present this project, getting the message out about it, I'm going to be really disappointed at the end of the day if in a year or two nothing happens, there's no progress, there's no movement, and there's yet another study. Because we know now you don't need that. You need action, you need unity, you need inclusiveness, and you need a vision, and you just got to go do it. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Please thank Greg and Janet for joining us. Also, thank you for joining us this morning, and I hope you can make it in February. Thank you very much.